I'm Captain Olivia Pearson, 29 years old, U.S. Army Logistics Command. I've led convoys through Afghan dust storms, but nothing prepared me for my sister's engagement party, where my family mocked my imaginary fiancé. They laughed until the ground shook, the music stopped, and a black helicopter descended over the garden. What would you have done? I arrived in Charleston just past noon, the kind of southern heat that sticks to your skin and doesn't let go. The air was heavy with magnolia and salt from the harbor, thick enough to chew. My parents' house stood at the end of a cobblestone lane, white columns gleaming, a place that looked like it had never seen a real storm. I parked by the hedge of manicured azaleas, cut the engine, and sat there for a moment, breathing through the kind of nerves I hadn't felt since pre-deployment briefings. Control your breathing. Observe. Don't react. That was rule number 1, whether you're rolling into a combat zone or walking into a family function that feels like one. The first shot fired came from my mother, Eleanor. She appeared on the porch in a floral dress that probably cost more than my monthly BAH allowance. "Olivia, darling, you made it," she sang, leaning in to kiss the air beside my cheek. Her perfume was overwhelming, gardenia and judgment. Her eyes did a rapid scan of my borrowed navy dress, the sensible flats, the hair tied too tight. "Oh," she said with a polite smile. "You look comfortable." In her language, comfortable meant plain, functional, forgettable. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Good to see you too, Mom." My father's voice boomed from the backyard before I even crossed the threshold. "Look what the cat dragged in." He was by the grill, bourbon in hand, surrounded by his golf buddies. "Did your commanding officer give you weekend leave for this, or did you file the proper paperwork?" Laughter rippled through the group. "They let me out for good behavior," I said evenly. My tone was calm, clipped, habit born of years of command briefings where emotion meant weakness. Their laughter lingered in the air, light to them, but to me it was the same sound I'd heard from bored corporals mocking recruits who froze on their first live fire range. You learn to let it roll off, or you pretend to. Inside, the party had already hit full tempo. The air conditioner hummed against the Charleston heat. On one side, silver trays of canapes. On the other, laughter clinking off glass. The crowd was every flavor of Southern money. Men in seersucker, women in pastel silk. The scent of pork smoke drifted in from the patio. I kept my hands folded behind my back. Military instinct, watching, not speaking. Fort Bragg's quiet discipline doesn't translate here, I thought. Back home, my morning started at 500 with the metallic taste of sweat, the rhythm of boots on pavement, the clean order of supply metrics. Here, order was social hierarchy, and I was already out of rank. Amelia, my younger sister, spotted me from across the lawn. The picture of debutante perfection in pale pink, her engagement ring flashing like a distress beacon. "Liv," she called, her voice syrupy and sharp at once. "Come meet everyone." I crossed the yard, each step deliberate, the same way I'd approach a negotiation with local elders in Kandahar. Respectful, cautious, ready for friendly fire. Amelia looped her arm through mine and turned to her circle of admirers. "This is my sister, the captain," she announced, the word captain landing like a punchline. "She manages trucks and boxes or something." "Supply chains," I corrected quietly. "Oh, right," she said with exaggerated warmth. "Very practical." A ripple of polite laughter spread through the group. My fingers brushed the phone in my pocket. Habit again. The screen pulsed once with a vibration. Message received. I didn't look. Just knowing it was there steadied me. Behind the laughter, my mother's voice carried from a nearby group. "Amelia's wedding planner says the ballroom alone is 6 figures, but she deserves it. She's always had an eye for quality." Then, lower. "Olivia doesn't really care about that sort of thing." They thought I couldn't hear, but I'd spent half my life picking up radio chatter through walls of static. I always heard what I wasn't meant to. I stepped back toward the shade of an oak, glass of sweet tea sweating in my hand. My father's voice floated from the grill again. She's got stories, I'll give her that. Half of them sound classified, probably because they're made up. The men laughed. I smiled into my drink, hiding the tightening in my jaw. Years of command had taught me one truth. Silence isn't surrender. It's ammunition. Then Amelia called again, louder this time. Liv, come here. She was surrounded by guests, her fiancé Bradley gleaming beside her in a watch that screamed for attention. We were just talking about fiancés, she said, her tone innocent. Eyes anything but. Mine, of course, you've all met. But Olivia's is a mystery. Isn't that right? My stomach dropped. The circle turned toward me, curiosity mixed with disbelief. I straightened my posture, every muscle falling into parade rest. He's in Geneva, I said simply. Geneva, Bradley repeated, smirking. How convenient. The group laughed again, softer this time, but it hit harder. The familiar burn crept up my neck. Somewhere behind me, the cicadas hummed in rhythm with my heartbeat. They thought they had me cornered. They didn't see the calm before contact, because in my pocket, my phone buzzed again. 2 words lighting up the screen like an incoming transmission. The jazz trio shifted into something smooth and forgettable. A tenor sax winding through the garden while the humidity turned every breath into work. I stood inside Amelia's circle like an uninvited witness, the sweet tea glass cooling my palm. Pastel linen and practiced laughter, masks so polished you could shave in the reflection. Geneva, Bradley said again, rolling the word around like a sommelier. That's where bankers go to take pictures with vault doors. He checked the time on his wrist like he expected an audience for the gesture. So you're pilot, hedge fund, defense guy. What is he today? Busy, I said, and real. Amelia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Liv, you don't have to make things sound cinematic. It's just us. Her tone suggested exactly the opposite. When does he get here? Before dessert? Or is the helicopter stuck in traffic? A ripple of laughter. Someone actually clapped. I let the sound pass through me like rotor wash. Observe, don't react. I noted exits. Wind direction, the clear rectangle cut into the lawn by catering stanchions. Enough space for a careful touchdown if someone had filed the right paperwork. Old habits. I set the glass on a side table and clasped my hands behind my back. Parade rest without the parade. Logistics, a woman in pearls said. That's boxes and trucks, right? My nephew did something like that at Amazon for a summer. He hated it. Boxes, trucks, and the math that keeps people alive, I said. Sequencing, redundancy, risk mitigation. When it fails, folks don't just miss their packages. Well, Bradley said, lips curving. Lucky for us, your gentleman delivers. A few heads bowed to cover smiles. I caught my mother across the lawn, conferring with a friend near the buffet, the posture of a commander issuing standing orders. My father lifted the grill lid like a curtain and announced to his flanking golfers, Our Olivia once told me a convoy story so secret I wasn't allowed to ask follow-ups. He grinned. Convenient. You didn't ask, I said. Not loud, not soft. It landed among the seersucker like a stray shell casing. Aunt Patricia materialized at my elbow, radiating inquiry. So if he is real, she said, a conspiratorial whisper strangers always reserve for soldiers. What does he do? Don't say classified. That's cheating. He builds systems, I said. Some you can see, most you can't. She said, unconvinced. Mystery is a young woman's game. Amelia squeezed my arm like we were partners on a talk show. Liv, show them a picture, she said brightly. Just one. We won't publish it in Town and Country, promise. My phone, silent as a pocketed flare, stayed put. He values privacy, I said. So do I. Privacy, Bradley echoed. In Charleston? The circle laughed in the genteel way people laugh when they smell blood. He touched the bezel on his watch again. the gesture of a man accustomed to closing arguments. Look, nobody's judging. Plenty of people have long-distance relationships with ideas. Bradley, Amelia said, faux chiding. Be nice. She held my left hand up, fingers splayed to the group, the diamond on hers performing its own light show. Besides, she added, we can end the suspense another way. She turned my hand so the sun lit the bare skin. No ring. The laughter changed color then. Quieter, meaner. It reminded me of the murmur that moves through a line of vehicles when the radio crackles and the map changes mid-route. Doubt, dressed like certainty. Maybe he's waiting for the perfect moment, someone said. Or the perfect internet connection. Maybe, I said. What's his last name? A bridesmaid asked, eyes bright. Sterling, I said. I let it sit there, unembellished. You learn in operations to give only what the room can safely hold. Classy, Bradley said, smirking, like the silver. He tipped his glass to my father. Richard, you're the banker. Ever heard of an Alexander Sterling? My father considered theatrically, as if scanning an index in his mind. Can't say I have, he said, loud enough. See? Bradley said. Mystery solved. The sax wavered on a sustained note that felt like a held breath. The heat pressed in. Somewhere to my right, a champagne cork took flight. Heads turned with the choreography of trained birds. I felt the old sensations I trust. The micro-tightening at the base of my skull when a plan flips. The calm that follows when training takes the wheel. 4-count inhale. Hold. 4-count exhale. Keep your eyes soft. Keep your tone lower than theirs. My mother arrived with a man in khaki and a resume. Charles. Olivia, she said too brightly. You remember Charles? His father is a partner at... We've met, I said. Charles smiled like a dentist. You look... well, he said, which is what people say when they mean not well. I hear you're still doing the army thing. Brave. Brave is the private who swapped seats in the last truck, I said. I solve problems. Which is why, my mother said, soldiering on. Charles and Bradley were just discussing opportunities. Something stable if you ever want to transition. Out of my life, Amelia added sweetly, barely moving her lips. The circle laughed again and the sound rang off the glass in my hand like a training round. I set the drink down before my fingers betrayed the tremor I refused to feel. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then a third time. Short, spaced, the way a good pilot taps acknowledgements on a secure channel. I did not look. I let the feedback steady me. Geneva, Bradley said for the third time, as if repetition could serve as proof. I'll give you this, Captain. You commit to your bit. I met his eyes, the way you meet a checkpoint guard who wants to be the story. I commit to timelines, I said, and to showing up when it matters. Then you won't mind showing up with him, Amelia said, before everyone leaves. 10 minutes? 15? She looked around the circle, already harvesting smiles. We'll wait. Amelia, I said, softly enough that only she could hear. You don't want the kind of entrance you're asking for. She blinked, then laughed too quickly. Oh, Liv, always so dramatic. Across the lawn, a caterer adjusted a neat line of orange cones near the far hedgerow, almost invisible against the grass if you weren't looking for them. A man with a discreet headset stood with his back to us, eyes on the sky, a clipboard tucked under his arm. No one noticed him. Old money crowds rarely look for the person in charge of safety. The saxophone slid into a new tune. The cicadas droned like 1,000 small engines. Somewhere beyond the oaks, a sound too deep for the speakers threaded itself through the afternoon. My phone vibrated a final time. I glanced down without moving the device from my pocket, reading by feel, by habit, the way you read a radio on a dark road. On station, 2-minute hover, confirm LZ. I looked back up at Amelia's perfect smile, at Bradley's coy certainty, at the ring of faces tuned for sport. I tasted the salt of the harbor in the air and felt my shoulders drop a fraction. 15 minutes? I said. Let's make it 2. At first, nobody noticed it. The soft jazz and polite chatter swallowed the sound like a wave taking a stone. Then came a low vibration underfoot, subtle but growing. A slow, steady whump. 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 That didn't belong in a Charleston garden. The saxophone faltered mid-note. Guests looked around, frowning, fingers half raised to shield their eyes from the bright late-afternoon sun. "What on earth is that noise?" someone asked, voice rising just above the growing thrum. My father didn't even glance up. "Probably a medevac from the hospital across Calhoun," he said, his tone the same one he used to wave off my career. "Nothing to worry about." But I knew that sound. Every soldier does. Rotor rhythm is like a fingerprint. Once it's in your bones, you never mistake it. This wasn't a medevac. The pitch was cleaner, sharper, turbine class. Corporate bird, twin engine, heavy lift. I glanced toward the far edge of the lawn where I'd noticed those orange cones earlier. Now, the man with the headset had a hand pressed to his earpiece, scanning the sky. My phone vibrated once more in my pocket. No alert tone, just that familiar, silent pulse. I slid my thumb across the screen, shielded from sight by the folds of my dress. Visual confirmed. 2-minute hover. Requesting permission to land. I smiled before I could stop myself. Permission granted. The sound deepened, pressing against the air until the garden itself seemed to tremble. Tablecloths flapped, champagne glasses rattled on silver trays. Guests turned their heads skyward, confusion turning into awe, awe into alarm. Then it broke through the tree line. Sleek, black, and impossibly elegant. A Sikorsky S-76 with polished rotors gleaming like blades of light. It moved with the kind of control that only comes from the best hands in aviation. Smooth, deliberate, unhurried. The Sterling Dynamics logo caught the sunlight for a split second. 2 interlocking letters, subtle, sophisticated, and to anyone in defense contracting, instantly recognizable. "Oh my goodness," Aunt Patricia gasped. "That can't land here." "It's private property," said a man near her, shouting to be heard. "Who would even—" He didn't finish. The helicopter began its descent, downdraft hitting like a wave. Napkins and rose petals spun into a storm. Amelia's shriek vanished in the roar as her champagne sprayed across the grass. My mother's floral centerpieces disintegrated in a rain of hydrangeas. I stood perfectly still, hair whipping across my face, the wind pressing against my dress. Around me, panic. Silk skirts clutching knees, hands covering faces, laughter cracking into chaos. The controlled calm of military training takes over in these moments. You don't panic when air shifts. You anchor. You breathe. When the noise eased into a steady hum, the helicopter settled gracefully on the marked patch of lawn. The rotor blades slowed, and the door slid open with a smooth hydraulic sigh. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then he stepped out. Alexander moved like he was immune to the weather. Tall, calm, a dark suit perfectly cut, his hair barely disturbed by the fading wind. He wasn't posturing. He was simply there, with the effortless authority of someone used to operating at a higher altitude. He scanned the chaos, overturned tables, guests frozen mid-expression, until his eyes found me. And then he smiled. Amelia's voice cracked the silence. "Who is that?" I didn't look at her. I took one slow breath, stepped forward through the grass that still rippled with rotor wash, and met him halfway. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough that I could smell the faint mix of jet fuel and cedar cologne. For a second, no words, just the sound of the helicopter winding down. Then, softly, like a classified exchange, "Captain Pearson." "Mr. Sterling." His hand came up, brushed my cheek, steady and sure. And in front of 50 stunned witnesses, he kissed me. Not the polite social kind. The kind that says she is mine to respect, not yours to ridicule. The garden went dead silent. Not even the cicadas dared to fill the space. When he finally pulled back, his voice carried over the wreckage of the party. Calm, composed, unbothered. "Apologies for the delay," he said. "Traffic over the harbor." It landed like artillery. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. I turned toward my family, their faces frozen somewhere between disbelief and dread. "Mom," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. "That's him." Her lips parted, soundless. My father's bourbon glass slipped in his hand. Amelia just stared, her engagement ring catching the last light of the sun, dull now against the fire of the man standing beside me. Alexander reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine, grounding me with the same calm I'd practiced for years. And as the last echo of the rotor blades faded into the humid air, I thought, mission accomplished. The party was still suspended in shock, the kind of silence that follows a controlled detonation, when everyone's too stunned to move and the smoke hasn't cleared yet. The jazz trio had stopped playing entirely. One of the musicians still held his sax halfway to his lips, frozen like a photograph. Alexander didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did. He just didn't care. He straightened the cuffs of his jacket and turned to my father with a calm, professional smile. "Sir," he said, his voice even, precise. "I hope I didn't interrupt dinner service. Your airspace team was very accommodating." "My airspace team?" my father repeated. His voice cracked like a rifle misfire. Alexander nodded toward the man in the headset by the hedgerow. "FAA waivers on file," he said. "Filed 48 hours ago. I asked to keep it discreet, but I'm afraid I underestimated Charleston gossip." A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. The word FAA had weight. Federal, official, real. My mother blinked rapidly, her lips parting as if to object, but no sound came out. Amelia recovered first. She crossed her arms, her pink dress whipping slightly in the last gust of rotor wind. "Cute," she said. "You rent a helicopter for dramatic effect. Must have cost a fortune on Airbnb experiences." Alexander's eyes flicked toward her, polite and deadly in their stillness. "If you're implying this was for show," he said, "I can assure you, Ms. Pearson, I don't do theatrics. I do logistics." He gestured subtly to me, and I realized what he was doing, turning humiliation into a field report. Facts over noise, procedure over pride. He reached into his jacket and handed my father a sleek black leather envelope. Inside were several crisp documents, sealed in plastic. My father hesitated before sliding one out, a contract printed on government letterhead with dense text and redacted lines. "You can confirm the identifiers if you like," Alexander said. "That's a procurement contract under Section 8210 of the Defense Authorization Act. My company holds the renewal bid for rotary systems integration in U.S. Army logistics. We filed the last delivery under her oversight." He nodded toward me. "Captain Pearson was our liaison." Someone gasped. It wasn't even dramatic. Just the small, involuntary kind of sound people make when their world shifts by an inch they didn't see coming. Bradley stepped forward, face flushed. "You expect us to believe this? Anybody can print a letterhead and black out a few lines." Alexander smiled, almost kindly. "You're right, which is why I included verification contacts on the back." He looked at my father again. "There's a number there for the Office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition. Ask for Major Tillman. She'll confirm." The shift was visible. All the power that had been gathered against me an hour ago was gone, diffused into the air like smoke after a shot. Now they were just people holding questions they weren't equipped to ask. My mother tried to find footing again. "We didn't mean any disrespect," she said quickly. "It's just that, well, you have to understand. Olivia has always been private." Private, I said quietly, is what kept me alive overseas. Alexander turned to me, and for a second the professional softened into the personal. His tone dropped just slightly, enough for only me to catch it. You shouldn't have to prove yourself to anyone, he said. He looked back at my family. But since this gathering seems to value demonstrations, from his inner pocket he withdrew a small case. Not flashy. Matte gray, almost utilitarian. He opened it, and inside was a ring, a diamond with restrained brilliance, military in its symmetry. He didn't kneel. He didn't make a speech. Olivia, he said, I was going to wait until the end of the quarter, but I'd rather not waste another day pretending this world isn't chaotic enough. So, if you'll have me, let's bring some order to it. I stared at him, heart caught somewhere between pride and disbelief. Around us, no one breathed. Then I said simply, yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger with steady hands, and for a moment I forgot the crowd entirely. Applause came late and awkward, a smattering of claps from guests who didn't know whether this counted as a performance or a confession. Amelia looked pale. Bradley had gone very still. My mother's eyes were wet, not from sentiment, but from something closer to self-recognition. Alexander closed the ring box, handed it to me, and said softly, Mission accomplished, Captain. He turned toward my father, offering his hand again. Sir, with your permission, we'll take our leave. My pilot's on standby. My father took his hand automatically, the gesture of a man still processing the chain of command. Of course, he said hoarsely. Alexander nodded once, then faced my mother. Ma'am, I left an envelope with Amelia. It covers the full cost of the engagement event. Consider it a contribution to your daughter's wedding. The precision of it landed like a final, quiet salute. There was no malice, only balance. We started toward the helicopter, hand in hand. Behind us, silence rippled through the manicured garden. No one laughed now. The petals still swirled where the rotors had kicked them, catching in the folds of Amelia's perfect dress. As we reached the cones, the pilot signaled thumbs up. Alexander turned to me, his voice low. Ready? Always, I said. And as the wind rose again, scattering the remnants of their laughter into the harbor air, I thought, not of revenge, but of peace. Because the mission was never to humiliate them. It was to remind them what respect looks like when it lands. The helicopter cut through the dusk like a black arrow over the Charleston coastline. The salt wind pressed against the windows, the city shrinking beneath us. Columns, church spires, and river glints fading into a watercolor blur. I sat beside Alexander, headset on, ring cool against my skin. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The kind of silence that follows a mission well executed doesn't demand words. When we landed on the private pad near the harbor, the air smelled of jet fuel and ocean. Sharp, clean, familiar. The pilot powered down the rotors and saluted Alexander before heading for post-flight checks. Alexander helped me down with a steady hand, like it was just another day's extraction. Inside the suite overlooking the water, I kicked off my shoes and finally exhaled. My muscles hadn't realized yet that the battlefield was over. Years of discipline make it hard to stand down, even when the threat is only emotional. Alexander set a glass of water on the coffee table beside me. Not champagne. Hydrate, he said. Always the first step after turbulence. I smiled faintly. Still running protocols on me, Major? He didn't answer right away, just leaned against the window, watching the harbor lights blink like distant beacons. You handled yourself well, he said finally. Didn't flinch, didn't escalate. That's leadership. Leadership, I said, half laughing, or survival instinct. He turned then, meeting my eyes. They'll come around, or they won't. But you did what you were supposed to. Held the line. The phone on the nightstand buzzed. Once, then again, then 3 times in rapid succession. My mother's name lit the screen. I let it ring out. The voicemail came seconds later. Her voice, brittle and trembling. Olivia, this stunt. What were you thinking? Bringing that man? That helicopter? People are talking. Your father's mortified. Amelia's in tears. You've humiliated all of us. There was a sharp inhale, then a softer, smaller voice. You always make things harder than they need to be. Please call back. Please. Alexander reached over, pressed the button that silenced the phone. You don't need to hear that tonight. She's still my mother, I said quietly. And you're still her daughter, he replied. But tonight you're also an officer. You don't answer hostile comms when you're off duty. That made me laugh. A short, tired sound. You talk like we're still in a briefing. He smiled. Old habits. We didn't speak again for a while. The city lights flickered across the ceiling like reflections from water. I sat with the silence until the tension in my chest began to loosen. Then I stood, crossed to the window, and looked out at the horizon. Black sky over black sea. Somewhere out there, the wind carried the echoes of what had just happened. It wasn't victory I felt. It was clarity. The kind you get after surviving a long patrol. When the adrenaline drains and you realize you made it back with your dignity intact. By morning, the first light crept across the harbor. I was up before dawn. As usual, years of reveille don't fade overnight. I found Alexander already dressed, coffee in hand, scanning something on his tablet. Weather's clear, he said. We can head north after breakfast. Before that, I said, I need to make one stop. He didn't have to ask where. He just nodded. Rules of engagement? Public setting, I said. Neutral ground. The Daily? I smiled. Always neutral ground. At 10 I was sitting at a corner table of the Daily Cafe, sunlight cutting through the big windows, Charleston's hum spilling in from the street. The coffee tasted burnt and honest. I'd picked the table for visibility. No ambush, no hiding. They arrived together. My father first, jaw tight. My mother just behind him. Sunglasses too large for indoors. Amelia trailing, eyes red, posture defensive. Bradley was absent. Maybe that was mercy. Alexander joined a minute later, on time as always, his calm radiating like a silent perimeter. He didn't touch me when he sat. Didn't need to. Presence was enough. My father didn't bother with small talk. I made a few calls, he said, voice rough. The number you gave me, Major Tillman, she answered. And? Alexander asked evenly. She said your contract's legitimate, that your clearance checks out. He looked down, thumb tracing the rim of his cup. She also said Captain Pearson is one of the few officers who doesn't exaggerate under stress, that her assessments keep people alive. The words landed harder than he expected. He blinked, looked away, cleared his throat. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said, not cruelly, just fact. My mother reached for my hand across the table. Her fingers trembled. We were wrong, she said. It wasn't supposed to go that way. I let her hand rest there. Didn't pull away. Didn't grip back. Just let her feel the boundary. Amelia finally spoke, voice small. I didn't mean to humiliate you. It was supposed to be funny. I met her eyes. When you mock someone in uniform, I said softly, it stops being funny. No one replied. The clink of dishes and distant chatter filled the silence instead. Alexander checked his watch. Never to rush, just to ground the moment. If we're done here, he said gently, we have a flight window to meet. My father nodded, the quiet obedience of a man who finally saw structure where he used to see rebellion. Understood, he murmured. We stood, exchanged restrained goodbyes. No hugs, no dramatics. Just the kind of peace that comes when people realize the chain of command was never about rank. It was about respect. Outside, the air was clear, the kind of morning Charleston rarely gets. No haze, no heat, just stillness. Alexander took my hand as we walked toward the SUV. "Debrief complete?" he asked. "Affirmative," I said. "Minimal casualties." He smiled. "Then we can stand down." As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back once through the window. My family was still at the table, heads close together, quiet. For the first time, I didn't feel like the outsider. I just felt done. The mission had ended. And for once, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. The next few weeks felt strange. Not quiet, just different. The kind of stillness that follows a long deployment. When the war's over, but your body still listens for the alarm. My phone stayed silent. No calls, no guilt texts, no family updates. And for the first time in years, that silence didn't hurt. It healed. Back at Fort Bragg, my days slipped back into the rhythm of command. PT at dawn, logistics briefings by 8, field runs by noon. Soldiers under my supervision respected me because of performance, not pedigree. Every decision had weight, but unlike my family's judgment, it was the kind that made sense. If I failed, people got hurt. If I succeeded, they got home. That was real accountability. It was about a week after returning that I got the first letter. Handwritten, no return address, but instantly recognizable in its neat, careful cursive. My mother. "Olivia, I attended a Blue Star Families meeting last night. I sat next to a mother who lost her son during a convoy accident. She said something that reminded me of you. They serve so others don't have to." For the first time, I think I understood what that really means. Love, Mom. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and set it inside my desk drawer. I didn't reply. Yet. She was following the new terms, and I respected that. A few days later, my father called. Not to lecture, not to ask for anything, just to inform me that he'd started reading Band of Brothers. His voice carried a reluctant humility I'd never heard before. "You ever meet Major Winters?" he asked, like a boy asking about a legend. "No," I said, "but I trained under someone who did." He was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, "You'd have made him proud." That one line did what no apology ever could. It felt like a rank insignia being quietly pinned back where it belonged. Even Amelia reached out, her text short but sincere. I applied for a pro bono program, legal assistance for veterans. Bradley's helping too. Maybe we can do something useful for once. It wasn't redemption, but it was motion in the right direction. Meanwhile, Alexander was already 3 steps ahead. He always was. We'd started discussing a project that combined his company's defense contracts with something more human. Not profit-driven, not PR-driven. Purpose-driven. One evening, he showed me a draft document on his tablet. The Pearson Sterling Initiative. Mission statement. To fund education for children of fallen or wounded service members. He didn't look at me as he said it, just scrolled slowly. You'd oversee operations, independent board, military-run compliance. My company will fund the first 3 years. I stared at the screen, throat tight. You named it after me? He smiled slightly. After both of us. But mostly after the captain who reminded her family what honor actually means. That's the thing about soldiers. We don't chase revenge. We chase balance. And slowly, piece by piece, balance was returning. 3 months later, I found myself back in Charleston, standing in front of the same house where everything had started. The magnolia trees still hung low. The harbor wind still carried that same humid salt. But the garden felt different now. Lighter. Inside, my parents were hosting again. But this time, the guest list was different. No financiers, no golf buddies. Veterans, local officers, and a few of my own soldiers who happened to be on leave. My mother had baked cookies herself, a detail so absurd it almost made me laugh. When I walked in, she looked up and froze. Then, with trembling hands, she set down the tray and crossed the room. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said softly. "Neither was I. I replied. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she hugged me, not the quick, shallow embrace of old times. A real one. The kind you give someone you're afraid of losing again. My father joined us a moment later. We thought maybe, he said, we could start over. I nodded. We can try, but no titles, no medals, just people. He smiled. Understood, Captain. Then, quickly correcting himself, Olivia. The evening went by quietly. My mother talked with the sergeant's wife about deployments. Amelia helped serve food. No one brought up the engagement party, the helicopter, or the ring. For once, there were no comparisons, just conversation. As the sun dipped below the harbor, Alexander found me on the back porch. You okay? He asked. I looked at my family through the window, laughing, unguarded, ordinary. Yeah, I said. For the first time, maybe I am. He nodded, slipping his hand into mine. Good, because this is what winning looks like. The word winning hung in the air, not as triumph, as peace. The war was over, the mission complete, and for once, everyone made it home. It's strange how silence can mean two different things. For years, silence in my family meant exile, words unspoken, affection withheld, respect denied. But now, sitting on the porch of my childhood home, watching the magnolia leaves sway in the breeze, silence meant peace. The kind earned after a long fight you never wanted, but had to win. The Charleston air still carried that same humid sweetness, the same salt from the harbor, but it no longer tasted like bitterness. It tasted like closure. My mother was inside, laughing softly with Amelia over the sink, her voice unguarded and real. My father was talking to Alexander about leadership in the army, genuinely listening for once, not performing. And me? I was finally still. People like to think justice is loud, that it arrives with explosions, with humiliation, with dramatic payback. But in the real world, in the world soldiers understand, justice is quiet. It's procedural. It's the world restoring its balance without needing applause. When I first joined the Army, my commanding officer told me something I never forgot. Pearson, in combat and in life, the loudest one in the room is usually the least prepared. He was right. The people who mocked me that day weren't evil. They were untrained. Untrained in humility, in respect, in recognizing what real strength looks like. They had built their whole world on noise, status, wealth, appearances, and mistook silence for weakness. But silence is what keeps a soldier alive. In the months after that infamous engagement party, I saw more change in my family than in the 29 years before it. Not because I lectured them, not because I proved a point, but because, for the first time, I didn't fight to be understood. I simply walked away until they learned how to listen. The truth is, some wars are won not by advancing, but by holding your position and refusing to retreat from who you are. That's what this was. A personal stand. A long overdue operation in reclaiming respect. Now, when people ask about that day, the helicopter, the chaos, the spectacle, I don't tell them it was revenge. I tell them it was a reminder, a lesson in perception. You can underestimate someone's title, their paycheck, their story, but never underestimate their discipline. Because discipline builds patience, and patience builds quiet power. When the noise fades, power is what remains. The same principle applies beyond the military. Maybe in your life, it's not a uniform that gets dismissed. Maybe it's your accent, your background, your dreams. Maybe you've been told you're reaching too high, moving too slow, or trying too hard. I've learned that those voices don't matter. The real mission isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. As soldiers, as professionals, as human beings, we fight many kinds of battles. Some you fight with weapons, others with words. But the hardest battles are the ones fought in silence, where the victory isn't about conquest, but about composure. That day at my sister's engagement party, I didn't win because Alexander landed a helicopter. I won the moment I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. That's when the war ended. That's when peace began. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Dignity doesn't expire. Authority comes from competence, not arrogance. If you've ever seen someone underestimated until the truth came out, someone who stayed calm while others laughed, someone who carried their honor quietly until it spoke for itself, then you already know how this story ends. Respect doesn't need to shout. It just needs to land. So, if this story reminded you of anyone, or maybe even yourself, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, and share your own moment of quiet strength. And if you believe that discipline is its own kind of power, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. Soldier Revenge uploads a new story every day. Real stories about dignity, protocol, and the kind of justice that doesn't need noise to be heard. Until next time, stay steady, stay sharp, and never forget, the strongest ones are usually the quietest in the room.